helps us overcome, it's outside my comfort zone, or maybe I just don't want to do that. If we focus on who it is that's called us to do it, we can overcome all of those things. And then we just have to do it to the best of our ability. And His Spirit, which is within each of us who believe, will be our strength. And He will equip us to do what He calls us to do. I experienced this over the last 14 months or so. I had to step into the interim district superintendent role from June of 2021 till August 1st of 2022. It was a role that I felt absolutely unqualified for. It was a role I didn't want. I had watched previous DSs. I didn't want their job. So God and I had a little bit of a wrestling match about that little assignment. But in the end, I had to focus on who was giving me the assignment. And I really didn't have a choice at that point. I had to trust in the one who was giving me the role. The role God calls you to play may be very different than what you were thinking it would be. It certainly was for me. It was for Jonah. You remember the story of Jonah, right? Jonah had a role to play, but it wasn't the one he wanted. He wanted a totally different one. So he tried to run away. That didn't work out so well. Don't be a Jonah. Be a Hathach. See, Hathach was a part of this story of Esther as well. Those of you who know who Hathach was, if you don't, he was the guy who ran between Esther and Mordecai and took the messages back and forth. Now, who would have wanted that job? Can you imagine if he got caught bringing messages to the queen? Or if he had got caught being out in the countryside someplace, running these messages back and forth? I'm sure his life was in danger many times. But Hathach, unlike Jonah, became personally involved. He didn't run from the role that he was given. You are a living example of the gospel. I am a living example of the gospel. Your life is made to make a difference. And it will. Your life will make a difference if you allow God to use you. If you keep your focus on Him, your life will make a difference. If you will allow Him to personally involve you in His larger plan, your life will make a difference. Your church will make a difference if you allow God to use your church as part of His larger plan. When your lives reflect Jesus, He will give you opportunities to serve Him. When your church reflects Jesus, He will give you opportunities to serve Him. And more importantly, He's going to give you opportunities to share about His salvation to those around you, both as individuals and as a church. Perhaps He has orchestrated your circumstances for such a time as this. We've got some interesting circumstances right now, don't we? Our world is a very interesting place today. It's very easy to think about our world as hopeless. But it's never hopeless with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. It's never hopeless. He has a larger plan. You are part of that larger plan. As individuals and as a church. Perhaps He has orchestrated your circumstances. Your individual circumstances. I don't know what your circumstances are. I'm sure they're all very different. But many of you are in circumstances today that I think we have to look at very carefully and say, are these circumstances being allowed in our life for such a time as this? Are the circumstances of this church happening for such a time as this? Esther was in the right place at the right time. God had orchestrated her ascent to the throne. God now wanted to use her circumstances, where she was, when she was there, for his greater purpose. You were also part of a larger plan, a plan orchestrated by God. It's not just for you and you alone, it's for his greater purpose. He has put you in the right place at the right time to be used by him for his glory. God is calling you to recognize how he has orchestrated your life, how you can serve him in your current circumstances. Mordecai had to remind Esther that she was in the right place at the right time. Esther, it wasn't like me coming to a stop sign and it just turns right, a stop light and it turns green. It wasn't like me being on the highway flowing along while the other side is dead stopped. Her being in the right place at the right time wasn't a good feeling. But does being in the right place at the right time always have to feel good? Does it always have to benefit us? Does it always have to be a pleasant place? Can being in the right place at the right time have a higher purpose that supersedes how we feel about it? What is your royal position? As an individual, think about it for a moment. What is your royal position? How has God positioned you? God asked Esther to use what he had given her. God had brought her to this royal position of queen, and now he is asking her to use that position for something greater. What has God given you personally? What has God given you as a church? How is he asking you to use it for his greater purpose during these difficult times that we find ourselves in? Ask God to speak to you directly. No one else can answer that question for you. What is your royal position? But you can go before the King of Kings. You can search the Spirit which is within you, and he will bring light to your royal position, why you are there, and what he wants to do through you in that position. Ask God to speak to you about that, personally and as a church. Find a Mordecai who can help you recognize your royal position. People can help us, like Mordecai helped Esther. Ultimately, it's upon us, but there are those around us who can help us. Maybe he's asking you to push through a difficult circumstance in your life. Maybe he's asking you to be part of a solution to a problem around you. We need to be asking ourselves as individuals and as churches, why are we in this royal position? Because if God has given you circumstances that are really good or circumstances that are not so good, he's given you those circumstances for a reason. How has God positioned you in this church right now? In this church for his greater purpose. The evil one tries to get us to focus on our problems. Satan wants us to pout instead of praise God. God wants us to be encouraged, not discouraged, regardless of what our circumstances are. The sovereign Lord is working out a larger plan. How has he positioned you? How has he positioned you individually and as a church to be part of a larger plan? You must seize the moment. Esther had a choice. Would she seize the moment that she had? A moment orchestrated by God? Would she become personally involved? Esther, with the help of Mordecai, recognized the moment. She chose to become personally involved. She made herself available, and God used her to accomplish his greater purpose in that moment. What if she had missed the moment? Mordecai told her, well, if you miss the moment, God will he'll accomplish his will another way, but you'll miss out. One, you and your family will be killed. And that was bad enough. But I think the worst thing was that if she had missed this moment, she would have missed being used by God as part of his larger plan. Some of the greatest moments in my life are times when God has used me to influence the life of someone else. And when we don't step into those moments, we back away from those moments, we don't become personally involved in those times, we miss out on being used by God. Some of the best experiences in our lives we miss because we don't allow God to use us in those moments. I heard it described this way once. We are an instrument God uses like a skilled surgeon uses a scalpel. A skilled surgeon can use any scalpel that's sharp and ready to be used. Will you be sharp and ready to be used by the Lord? Because if you are, he will choose to use you. And he will accomplish great things through you as part of his larger plan for his glory. Warren Wiersbe's commentary on Esther says this. Dr. A.W. Tozer compared God's sovereign purposes to an ocean liner leaving New York City bound for Liverpool. He was undisturbed, unhindered towards the fulfillment of those eternal purposes for which he purposed in Christ Jesus before the world began. The sovereignty of God doesn't suggest fatalism or blind determination, both of which would make life a prison. Only a sovereign God is great enough to decree freedom of choice for men and women, and only a sovereign God could fulfill his wise and loving purposes in this world and even make evil cooperate in producing good. The question is not, is God in control of this world? But is God in control of my life? Are we cooperating with him so that we are part of the answer and not part of the problem? So the real question is God in control of my life? Give him full control, and you will begin to see that he will continue to bring you into the right places at the right time so that you can join him as part of his larger plan. How is God asking you to get personally involved in his larger plan? Has a new conversation with someone started recently? Maybe at your job. Maybe it's a new neighbor that moved in. Maybe it's an old neighbor that's lived next to you for a long time. Maybe it's a clerk at a store that you frequent. Maybe it's a ministry here in this church that has just been tugging at your heart a little bit. Maybe it's a missionary that you've heard speak that has kind of moved you. I don't know what it is for you. But search and find out what is it? How is it that God is calling you to become personally involved? God has redeemed you. How is he inviting you to share in his larger plan of love and redemption? And the third thing, the final thing that we can learn from Esther's story is that our involvement will take courage and faith. Our involvement is going to take courage and faith. Action won't be easy. It often requires immense courage to act. So what did Esther do when she needed that kind of courage in order to act in that moment? She sought God. First, she sought God. She didn't move forward without seeking God and leaning on her knowledge that God cared for her. And neither should you. Matthew 6:30 says, if God cares so wonderfully for the wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you.